Today's webinar will be an introduction to Microsoft's new security solution, Azure Sentinel. Just a reminder, this session is being recorded, and please make sure to send any questions through the Q&A function within Teams. Just a little bit about us. Synergy Technical is an IT consulting firm headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. We have clients in over 70 countries in all 50 states and manage over 2 million licenses of Microsoft 365 for our clients through our licensing and managed services practice. Just this past February, 2020, I guess I need to change that, 2021, we were awarded the Microsoft 365 Security Deployment Partner of the Year award. And a large part of that success is the work done by today's presenter, Adrian Amos. Adrian is a deep-level Microsoft security expert who has had the honor of running both productivity and security workshops at Microsoft Ignite for the last 2 years. So he's definitely, could not think of a better person for this. We'll be leading today's webinar. And Adrian, with that, I will hand it over to you. And we in this together, we'll figure it out. But yeah, if you want to share.
Thank you so much, Christina. Just to let you know as well, your slide deck is not yet incorrect because this past February was still February 2020. So
okay,
yeah,
so
no rush on updating that. You got another whole week to get on top of that.
That's true.
So all right, so what?
No, never mind. Continue.
All right. So, with that, I'm going to jump right into Sentinel. I do need to offer up an apology in advance for today's attendees. I have very much preferred to demonstrate things live for years and years and years. You know, live by the demo, die by the demo. Unfortunately, we are back in our houses again, dealing with the increased viral load, as it were. And as a result, I am working with my deep country internet, and it is poor at best. So we're going to be doing some screenshots today. Some are better than others. Try to put this together as best I can with the content from my actual demo environment. There are a couple times where things were not as good as I wanted them to be, so my apologies. Hopefully we'll be back to live demos and all that kind of fun stuff very soon. But with that, let me jump into what in the world is Sentinel actually. So Sentinel is Microsoft's SIEM and SOAR solution. It's built to augment the security capabilities that exist across the Microsoft 365 and the Microsoft Defender stack. But to understand kind of what it does and what gaps it fills, we need to first talk about what in the world is a SIEM. Right, so SIEM is short for a Security Information and Events Management Solution. The general goal of these products is to give SecOps a red light, green light view of the entire organization's security posture. So we kind of get everything feeding signals into one place, and then we're trying to figure out what those signals really mean, right? So that means connecting it to things like firewalls, servers, workstations, cloud apps, all that kind of stuff to pump it into an aggregator, overlay rules on that data, and figure out if things are going as we want. Done well, a SIEM is a fantastic security solution, but what we tend to find is that most SIEMs only get partially integrated. They go in much like, oh gosh, wow, you just thought of Hyena from years ago when we would do these large security implementations where we'd start off with guns ablazing and get in and get all the stuff configured and analyzing, and then there'd be some drift and we wouldn't, maybe a department wouldn't get the update or whatever, but we would start to see things kind of falling out of the scope of the solution that we had set up. Or worse, we end up drowning in so many alerts that we end up filtering those alerts out. And I will say I have encountered a few places where security admins have actually set up rules to block messages from the SIEM to say, it's not effective, right? And that's, at that point, we've sort of lost the plot. So what we need is a solution that can bring in the data that we want, aggregate it, analyze it, and then alert us on the things that actually matter to us. So again, kind of bringing it back to the Microsoft space, right? So we have Azure Defender that's sitting there looking at the Azure component side, the Azure IaaS and the Azure PaaS solutions that sit there in the Azure space, managing the security of those systems. Then we have, on top of that, we have the Microsoft 365 Defender data set. And when we marry those things together, we get Microsoft Defender, right? So a combination of Azure Defender and M365 Defender, we get all those things. And those are fantastic point security solutions that add together and share signal data for an internal security organization to really understand like what's going on. But there are times when we do need more, right? And those can have those can really be important if we're dealing with on-premises, third-party cloud, additional partner solutions, that we need to be able to pull in additional signal data and understand kind of the contextualized relevancy of the data that we're seeing and trying to act on. So if I kind of dive into the stuff on the left here, the M365 Defender, right? We've done a lot of events and series looking at the attack kill chain and talking about the importance of the signal integration and all that fun stuff that lives there, right? Understanding the protect, detect, respond, the zero trust and all that stuff. Again, so kind of trying to understand like what are the gaps that aren't filled in this space and why are you now trying to sell me some additional security solution? Because again, we have this whole unified security idea, right? Where we can go in and we can see all the incidents that occur and we can see all the alerts and the trends and status and we can get the exposure scores and the threat and vulnerability management. We've got the identity stuff. We've got all this stuff from Cloud App Security telling us what are the concerns that we need to have, right? But there are still some gaps in that, and maybe those gaps actually pertained to the SecOps model of your organization. So what we kind of found, and it was funny, guys, I was putting this slide together. I had just finished putting it together, and I literally the next day had a conversation with a customer that said, if there's like a 1 to 5 scale for how you see security organizations configured, we're probably at a 0. And I said, hey, funny enough, I literally just put this slide together. So what we tend to see is kind of a 1 to 5 scale of how security organizations are implementing their security posture, right? Smaller organizations, and this is not small in the sense of like you're teeny tiny and you can't justify anything. Like I've seen smaller organizations in the sense of 5 to 10 people. I've also seen folks that were international conglomerates that tried to get away with an IT guy, right? But what we find here is that this is a relatively simple security requirements, few workloads. So maybe you're just a principally entirely Office 365 cloud. You've got a few computers. You don't really manage a lot of workflows or workloads in those things. You don't really need to have a strong need for a formal security program. Then that's fine, right? You're the one guy who can reach in and touch all these workloads, no big deal. Organizations that go beyond that maybe have some independent silos where there has to be some level of administration. There's a security guy or a security gal, but they don't usually touch the tools, right? They deal with the reporting of it, and then they push security requirements back out to those teams. Little bit of integration, not a whole ton of it. Where we start to move up into the higher models here, and where a SIEM starts to become important, is when we get in this area between 3 and 4. When we start having to align to compliance frameworks, when we start having more of these siloed administrative functions, right? And we need to be able to integrate signals, respond faster. When we start to see things like where we need to have intelligence-driven response and recovery, and these places we start to see that the concept of a security guy or a security team maybe kind of falls a little bit short. And what we need then is some overlying system that's usually monitored by an outside group, right? Whether it's an MSSP or a separate team in your organization that manages and monitors your security overall. And then when we get into the far right side, where we have like either government contract work or really big, really high security organizations, is when we actually can authorize the security group, the SOC, to actually take corrective actions in our environment on behalf of the SIEM. So at that point, we start looking at this SOAR capability, the security orchestration and automated response capabilities. And then, again, these are organizations that are dealing with a lot of continuous improvement, a lot of regular auditing. This is where the security controls get really important. So there's no right or wrong space to be in here, right? But generally what we're going to find is if you're in the left side of this, a SIEM is probably overkill. I'm just going to say that again. If you're on the left side of this, is not the wrong place to be, but a SIEM, there's no sense getting the same alert from 3 separate systems to only do one corrective action. There might be sense in getting 3 separate alerts so that the Defender guy knows to go in and make a change, but you also alert this up the chain to the SOC, who can then turn around and report it back to this up senior management so that it doesn't get lost, right? Or if there's a reportable incident that has to happen. There's no wrong place to be, but a SIEM is probably overkill if you're here. So with that, let's talk about one other timing situation here and why this is important right now. Mainstream support for advanced threat analytics, which was Microsoft's first foray into kind of a SIEM attempt. That ended earlier this month, a couple weeks ago, as a matter of fact, on January 12, mainstream support was terminated for ATA. There will continue to be 5 more years worth of code updates, but there will not be any further detection capabilities in that space. So if you're an ATA customer, or if you have a need for logging Azure Active Directory logs that go back more than 30 days, if you have third-party cloud integrations, if you have device logs and all these other logging requirements that have to go back longer than what those things are tailored to handle natively, or if you just really super want to nerd out on getting like some really cool investigative alerts, a SIEM is probably the right way to go. Azure Sentinel is literally the only one that is infrastructure free. And it's also been recently assessed in a Forrester Wave security analytics platform report in Q4 of last year. And you can see it's one of the few solutions that sits up here in the top right, and is in fact the farthest to the right. So the strategy is the strongest, even if the offering itself hasn't really fully penetrated into the full market. But more important than just the wave information is the forecasting for the total economic impact, right? Microsoft has been assessed as having a 201% ROI over 3 years with less than 6 months to pay off the implementation of the solution. And when I talk about this 2/3 reduction in times of deployment, this is literally a SIEM that you can have deployed and pulling logs and doing investigative work within half a day. Obviously, more complicated environments may take more time than that, but I mean, literally half a day to have a SIEM fully deployed and pulling data and looking at things and trying to tell you if there's a challenge. So extremely powerful, extremely easy to get in and decide if this is even something that you want to spend time looking at. And ongoing maintenance costs is super duper low. The reduction in false positives, which again is why we see admins going in and just turning alerts off, almost an 80% reduction in that compared to traditional SIEMs and other market solutions. So again, going back into what is Sentinel, kind of how does it work, right? It is a SIEM, it is a SOAR, it can do the orchestration and automation. What it's going to be built on, though, is we kind of drain the left side here. We have all these different data connectors that exist out here. And 3 weeks ago, this number was in like the upper 60s. It's in the mid 70s right now. This number just keeps going up. These are available built-in native communication or connectors that Microsoft has published for Sentinel. Now, a lot of these are Microsoft, right? You can see that there's a pretty lengthy list here of connector providers that we can reach into. But once we've actually decided which ones we want to do, we have to connect them. And then once they're connected, we'll be able to actually see, are they pulling data right now? And this is actually kind of where we get into customers having lit up Sentinel and they call us and they say, yeah, I turned it on, but I'm not getting anything. Well, it turns out you actually have to do additional stuff, right? And this is where Microsoft might be able to better help us understand what is the next steps. But generally, just connecting the workbook doesn't really do all the work, right? We have a list of instructions and prerequisites. It'll tell you, do you have the right license? Do you have the right permissions to do this stuff? But then you need to actually go in and light up some additional capabilities. And then once you've done that, there is also a next step solution that's going to say, hey, you should probably turn on these additional recommended workbooks and turn on these rules for analytics. If you want to get started querying things right now, you can go in and do these KQL queries. If you dig into the recommended workbooks, this is where we're actually going to have all these workbooks that are built in here too. And Microsoft and the Azure Sentinel community and others have built these beautiful templated dashboards here, right? And there's 80 that were in my list, and you can just save them to your space or view the template, tweak it to whatever you need it to be, so you see the pretty dashboards and things that you want. Now, you will notice that right up here, this one says that there is an update available for the investigation insights. So I can decide that I want to use this the way that I've had it, but maybe somebody has made some tweaks and they were like, hey, we had that one dial that never worked right, so we've fixed it. You can say, I want to go ahead and accept those changes, or you can just reject that and say, no, the way that I've got it fixed for myself is the way that I want to see it. So you can absolutely, accept changes, refuse changes. You can keep things up to date and current and see all the kind of stuff that needs to happen over time. And it's really fun. So going into those things, though, and then lighting up and looking at the kind of workbooks that are in here, this one is the Office 365 one. And yes, it says Loggy McLogface. Let's just call that out. Sentinel is built on top of log analytics, and there are some things that you will think are behind the scenes in Azure that no one will ever see. Like, why would it ever need to surface the name of my log analytics workspace? Well, I was tired and I had to build my log analytics space to support my Sentinel, and I wasn't feeling very festive. So I came up with Loggy McLogface, and now I'm stuck with it, and it's surfaced through here. So note that some of the choices that you make will follow you, and you can't really easily change them. So yes, Loggy McLogface, and it's fun. Anyway, Office 365 logs are actually free to ingest and report through Sentinel. So, like, as a great starting off point to see, should I even be messing with this? Turn it on, connect it to Office 365, dig through this thing. You can see there's a scroll bar here that actually goes pretty far down. So there's a lot of information in here about how the Office workloads are being used, what kind of administrative activities are happening in here. We can go through and we can actually edit this template. We can do whatever we want to with it. But this is one that's actually made by Microsoft, and this one is one that's made by the Azure Sentinel community. And you can see that there's some differences in here about how different people decided to organize their templates. But this one is one of my absolute favorites. I live in this guy a lot. Is my Azure AD Audit logs. Looking at what kind of activities are happening, whether they're being successful or not. Do I need to worry about my user's inability to change passwords? Everything in these spaces is drill down capable, so you can go through and get underneath and actually look at the KQL query that drives it. And then you're also going to be able to light up these analytics rules, right? So that was one of the next steps processes that was involved in actually creating the connection. But these are where we see people not getting any data out of Sentinel. If you have set up your connectors and you have not done anything with analytics, you might not get a whole lot of reporting. So the way you get to these, though, is, like I said, you get to that next steps on any of your things, and it's going to have this thing right down here that says create a rule. So as you come into any one of these connectors and you say, hey, let's create a rule, you're going to go through a simple process of naming the rule, setting the logic, setting the rules around the incident settings, whether or not there should be an automated response. And some of these rules are extremely complicated, right? But this is the beauty of it. You're just pulling in data, and then there's other people that are writing these rules that are just this massive KQL text. So if you find that, hey, this just doesn't work for me, you can come in and you can edit this to your heart's content, make this rule work for you, whatever it is you need to do. And then you can go through and actually get reporting on whether or not these things are happening. So once you got your reporting on that, right, things are going to surface to incidents. And by default, it's going to go to last 24 hours. I think you can go up to 6 months, but I'll have to verify that. Anyway, every single one of these incidents is coming from some connected system, right? So my data connectors and my analytics are driving my incidents. In this case, I have Cloud App Security and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint that are reporting their data together to show me the type of incident that's happening. I have a direct link to go chase that incident in its actual siloed system. So again, if you have that data siloing between, you know, the Defender admin and the SIEM admin can send the incident report, and the Defender admin can actually get a link to their own thing to work on, right? All of the evidence and the entities and all the tactics are going to be surfaced right here within the first page, so you don't even have to go do any real digging to figure out what's going on. But there's also this beautiful investigate button. And when you go into that investigate space, that's when you're going to start to see, like, how is all of this stuff connected, right? In this case, I'm running a notepad document where I'm injecting a PowerShell session into, or a PowerShell command into it. It's going to give me information about the timeline of the attack, information about each of these things. If I click on any one of these, I'm going to get an information bucket on it. Entities is going to show you what you saw on the previous page about, like, all the things that were impacted. In fact, it'll have a list of all of these items here. Insights, if it's a known attack vector on the wild, it's going to tell you probably kind of what you ought to be doing about it. And then you can leverage those insights and all that kind of fun stuff to run these playbooks. Now, I don't have any playbooks in my Sentinel environment. These are Azure Logic apps, which are functionally just applied Power Automate sessions and events. So if you can work in Power Automate, you're familiar with the GUI that exists there for that, you're going to be totally happy building Azure playbooks or Sentinel playbooks. Logic Apps documentation is linked right there too, so you can absolutely get straight through into that guy. And then we have these threat intelligence, right? User entity and behavioral analytics, which is one of the newer things that's come out in Sentinel in the last 6 months or so. This is kind of looking a lot like the Defender for Identity view that exists in the Microsoft 365 Defender space. So we're starting to see some of the views that exist on the one side be replicated over into here. And again, if you're a small shop, this is drowning by signals, right? If you're a large organization, though, this is giving your SOC the same visibility into your challenges as your NOC or as your data silo operators, right? So we have this capability of looking at what are the things that are happening with our users. We have all the contact information, the entity link for the actual user, and all the fun stuff that will go along here. Whether or not there are things that we need to go and dig into right here, including what they're actually doing inside their Office applications. So it's all linked together right here. We also have this threat intelligence view, and this is still in preview right now, but this is actually giving you the ability to say, hey, I'm worried about my organization in the context of how we also interact with the world. And I know that there's Diego's cousin has been trying to hammer on our network from this IP address, right? We want to have with 100% confidence, flagging of actions that are happening from this IP address. Or maybe we want to be keeping an eye out for, actions that are trying to go to this URL. Right, so we can add these custom threat indicators for monitoring purposes and have these things get all correlated to other things that are going on in our environment. We also, and this is where I have a poor quality slide, and I apologize, I had to pull this from somewhere else. This is where we can actually set up watch lists for specific groups of users. And right now, this is limited to CSV file input, but we can actually set up watch lists of users and tie those watch lists to all of the other actions that we also worry about too. So, maybe we're worried, maybe we have an R&D department and we're really worried about how they interact with things. We really need to keep a good close eye on them. We can actually set up all sorts of different rules and behavior, monitoring for them as well. Then we also now have the ability to support Juniper notebooks, and without getting too deep into these, the great news is that there is a notebook for getting started with notebooks, so it's a great easy way to dig into it. But do be aware that if you decide to dig into notebooks, it's going to expand your cost impact for Sentinel, right? Because at this point, now you are required to bring to bear a key vault, application insights, and a container registry. So there's some additional things that will have to be added to do Juniper notebooks. But that kind of in a nutshell is Azure Sentinel, right? So we've got our incidents, our alerts, we've got all the things that are coming in from the connected Microsoft 365 and the Microsoft Defender space, while also being able to monitor for firewalls and endpoints and third-party integrations and user behavior and threat intelligence signals from out in the wild, to bring all that information together to get an orchestrated view with automated response capabilities that we can give our SOC or our managed security services provider to have insight and visibility across our entire Microsoft connected workspace.